We are live, finally, with Chris Scontras on Cynthia Dill Live. I apologize for the late start. There was a technical snafu, but welcome to the program, Chris Scontras.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Sydney. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Well, yeah, now we have to do a redo, but you are running as a write-in candidate to be a trustee for the Portland Water District because the municipalities of Cape Elizabeth and South Portland have an open seat and no one qualified to be on the ballot. So let's start the program again by if you could just briefly describe what you know about the position and then why you think you're a good candidate for it.
Okay, great starting point. So when I saw that, I said to myself, gee, this is something I have some relative experience for. So why don't I investigate a little bit further with some due diligence? And I ended up setting up a meeting, excuse me, at the Portland Water District with Chris Crovo, who's the interim general manager. But I also, prior to that, I spoke with both the clerks in Cape Elizabeth and South Portland to get a better handle on the process and requirements and how this would all work. But more importantly, spent the time with Chris, did some due diligence on the water district, and came away very impressed with a very well run operation. A lot of long-term employees, and I said the turnover rate here has to be really low, which is a good thing. And they seem to have their act together and a plan together that has really worked well.
Well, the Portland Water District, according to the literature, meets about twice a month, and the term is for 5 years, and there's just a small stipend. Why is somebody like you, who has an extensive career in risk management and other things that we can talk about later, what brings you to the table now?
It's not about the money. It was a way of giving back. And I think, I spent my career working very hard in the corporate level and, was looking for ways when I retired about a year and a half ago to kind of give back. I do volunteer at St. Vincent's Soup Kitchen. That's one area where I work and try to give back, but I was looking for something else to kind of fill up my portfolio of daily activity. And then when I saw this unfilled position, I looked at it a little bit further, did a little bit more discovery and said, I could bring something to the table there. So I pursued it.
What do you understand the job is of a trustee for the Portland Water District? What's your responsibility?
I think it's really a check on the management of the company, both from a balance sheet standpoint, financials, probably less so from an operational standpoint, but at a high level operational side. We're a check and approval method that the leadership of the Portland Water District has to go for approvals. Some people might call it a rubber stamp. I'd have to say it may be a rubber stamp sometimes and probably not other times. So it's an oversight position, very similar to, investor-owned company with the stockholders and a board.
There's a big difference between South Portland and Cape Elizabeth. South Portland has about 18,000 voters, and Cape Elizabeth has about 7,000. That's approximate. Do you have any reason to think there's other people running for the position, or what do you know about the field and your
I would
competition?
say I tried to discover that when I met with both, the clerks of both the towns and also with the water district. I think in this kind of situation, you never know. I mean, at the end of the day, you never know if anyone is going to put their head in, which to me would be great. So mission accomplished, right? That there would be someone else running for this position and hopefully qualified so that it would be terrible. I'm sure there's a mechanism in place to appoint somebody. I didn't look at that, but I thought, hey, it's this close to the election. I'm willing to give this a shot and, and represent the stakeholders of those two cities.
Now, one thing that you were a little bit active in the sense that you wrote a letter to the Portland Press Herald about it, was the question on last year's ballot regarding the Pine Tree Power citizen initiative, and you were opposed to that. And you said your experience in the private sector, and particularly risk management, kind of led you to conclude that that was just a bad idea for a lot of different reasons. So one of the things you said was wrong with the model of Pine Tree Power was that the board didn't have any specialized knowledge. The Portland Water District trustee position doesn't have any prerequisites. Are you concerned that either yourself or other trustees might not have the necessary expertise to really manage something like a water utility?
Not really. I don't think I think it's a good point to bring up, but the comparison is stark because the Portland Water District has been around for a long time. So there's a legacy path, an imprint, footprints, a business model that is proven and successful. And you don't want to try to rearrange the furniture on something that has been proven and successful for all the stakeholders for such a long time. Unlike Pine Tree Power, which was somewhere between a fire drill and a car accident.
Well, I was surprised a little bit to see that in South Portland, which is known to be a little bit more progressive, I would say a lot more progressive than Cape Elizabeth to a certain extent, voted it down also. But speaking of national politics and state politics, it is very divisive, and we're coming upon the national election that's going to be just epic turnout. And a lot of people are split along party lines. Do you see any partisan politics coming into play at the Portland Water District?
I don't, and I hope there wouldn't be, but I may be a little naive on that. I think there's politics embedded in everything. I am not a political person, so I tend to either ignore or miss maybe some of the political undercurrents. I think the Portland Water District probably has everything has some degree of politics involved, but I don't think it comes into impact on the way it operates, its performance year over year, and how it maintains such an excellent service record.
What drives you as a person? Like, tell us a little bit about Chris Scontras, the man.
I think it's a lot based on, like with where you're from, what's the story with how did you grow up? I'm a strong believer in, the apple doesn't necessarily drop too far from the tree. So I was one of 7. I grew up in Kittery, Maine, second oldest, 5 boys, 2 girls. And 7 kids in the house with a bed, 1.5 bathrooms. You needed to figure out how to survive pretty early. So there was some talent on that side, but then I really defer to my parents. My father was a mechanical engineer, former Maine maritime grad that served in the Navy and later in Washington, D.C. and NAVSEA Bureau of Ships. My mother hailed out of Newport, Rhode Island, and she was really the one that ran. My father was an engineer in the truest sense. My mother was an entrepreneur that never had the chance in the truest sense.
Now, your parents were Greek
immigrants. That's right, first generation, and which was another piece of the puzzle. If you know many Greeks, you have an idea. They have a competitive thirst. So it was I have to say, like anybody else, you got to be pointed in the right direction and have a lot of the right values. And thankfully, my parents were able to do that for us, all of us.
Now, one thing that I didn't realize about our water system until I looked into this position is, just the history of the Portland Water District is very, very interesting. And the fact that we have this Sebago Lake and a pipe that takes water from Sebago Lake to our town in Cape Elizabeth in South Portland. And as I understand it, there's no filter.
As I understand it, there's no filter, but we're not technical people. But essentially, yes, that water is coming from the lake through the system with very little, if any, treatment in terms of the purity of the water. I'm sure there's something I'm missing there. I only had one meeting with them, but I know from meeting with them, there's maybe less than 10 public water companies, utilities in the country that can claim that.
Unbelievable. And tell us why a little bit about your professional experience and why it might apply to this position as a trustee of the Portland Water District. What did you do in your previous professional life?
Yeah, most of my career I spent in the power and utility sector of risk management and insurance. I was the U.S. Managing Director for Aon's U.S. Power and Utility practice. And, that included large investor-owned utilities, public power companies, private equity owned operations, and renewables, nuclear, and conventional power. And particularly over the last 5 to 6 years, that was all getting blurred. So, and it was also getting blurred not only from a domestic standpoint, but a lot of the power, and not many people know that a lot of the utilities, the investor utilities, have been purchased, sometimes by non-U.S. companies, which bring other types of challenges and interesting challenges and experiences.
Well, some people are concerned about the water resource and that it may be privatized or taken over by Wall Street. I mentioned to you in our earlier conversation my fascination with Michael Lewis's Big Short, and the prediction at the end that water was going to be the next big bubble. Do you have a position about whether the public water supply should remain in the public's hands, or do you believe that it could be run more efficiently if we sold it to, say, a hedge fund?
I haven't seen anything that would lead me to believe that this should be put into the private equity or hedge fund ownership.
Good.
So that would be drastic. I think at this. Now, that's not saying that that hasn't happened in some areas of the country. I'm sure it has, because of either not as poor operating models and poor leadership and management. I don't think there's anything consideration of that here. But I hear what you're saying, because water is a limited resource, right?
Now, you have a very extensive professional career and very impressive. Do you have any political experience?
Zero political experience. Unfortunately, that probably even made my job even more difficult in the private sector, because I'm not good at the political side of things. I just, I like to kind of get things done. So politics has probably been one of my weakest area. I have some siblings that like to dabble in it, but not me.
Well, this seems like a good first step. It seems relatively, modest politics. I did watch one of the meetings, and it was blessedly only 40 minutes long or less, which was great. And they only meet twice a year. And so I think you'll be a good fit. The interesting challenge, I think, for a lot of people is going to be able to fit your name on the ballot. In Cape Elizabeth, it's the municipal ballot. And then it says, to vote for a person whose name is not printed, write the person's name and municipality on the line provided, but the line is just like, maybe a couple inches. Do you have any strategies on how you're going to get people to remember how to spell your name and write it in?
Great observation. My wife Ellen made the same observation. She said, the people, the both clerks at the city of South Portland and Cape Elizabeth have been fantastic. I'm sure this has happened before. And so I think we're going to have to shorten my name. I'm going to have to use the abbreviated Chris versus the Christopher to fit on there. But I agree with you, Cindy. Nothing is simple.
Well, how do you spell Scontras for people who are listening? It's Chris.
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's spelt many different ways depending on where you are in the country. But it's Scontras.
Well, Chris Scontras, I again apologize for the earlier technical snafu, but before we conclude this time, is there anything you'd like to say to the voters of Cape Elizabeth and South Portland before they head into the polls about the position or about yourself?
Sure. As I said earlier, my comments was I've recently retired. I saw this come up as an open position, which is unfortunately happening more and more. And I said, it's time for me to get off the sidelines. I've never done anything like this, but I have a lot of material and a creative experience in the sector. I can bring something to the table for the stakeholders and the stockholders from South Portland and Cape Elizabeth relative to the Portland Water District. And I know it was one meeting I had over there, but I was very impressed. It's a good operation, solid, and it's important. I think, that's one of the real key issues that you brought up going forward. There could be a lot of changes here, and I'm here to help manage and guide through that process.
Well, Chris Scontras, thanks so much for joining the program. I wish you the best of luck, and I look forward to seeing you after the election to see how things shake out.
All right. Thank you so
All right,
much.
thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
It worked.